Good evening, everyone. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Joe Buck. I'm the mayor of Lake Oswego, and on behalf of the City Council and the City of Lake Oswego, it's my honor to welcome you all here this evening to the 2026 Ella Reads Author Event. It's really great to see such a strong turnout for both the conversation we're about to have and for everything happening around it. I love that we had a mini preparedness fair alongside this event, as while we gather around ideas and stories, we're also thinking about how we take care of ourselves and each other in the real world, and that's a great thing. And that hits a little closer to home than it might have even a year or two ago. I think a lot of us remember the ice storm in 2024. It was probably the closest some of us have felt to a true widespread disruption, with the trees down across the city, power outages, freezing temperatures, and roads blocked. In some ways, it felt like nature had turned on us a bit. I sometimes wonder if that's how nature feels about us. For a lot of people, it was unsettling. And for a community that prides itself on safety, the event exposed real vulnerabilities in how prepared we are when tested. But it also reminds us that when things shift, we don't navigate those moments alone. That connects directly to this year's Ella Reads selection, Tilt, by Pattee. It's a story about what happens when things sometimes suddenly shift and how people respond, how we steady ourselves, and how relationships are tested and how we make sense of uncertainty. What I appreciate most about a book like this and a program like Ella Reads is that it gives us a shared story to digest through our varied perspectives. It invites a little curiosity about how others experienced it, what stood out to them, and what resonated differently. This year also marks the 20th anniversary of the Ella Reads program, which is pretty remarkable. For 2 decades, our community has come together around books and ideas, year after year, building a tradition and a culture of connection and shared experience. And that doesn't happen by accident. It comes with much thanks to the Lake Oswego Public Library, the Friends of the Lake Oswego Public Library, and the many individuals who dedicate valuable time to create the programming and experiences that surround the annual selection. So thank you to our library team, the organizers, and everyone who has been a part of Ella Reads over the years. And thank you all for being here and continuing that tradition. I hope you enjoy the program this evening. And now let's welcome to the stage the president of the Friends of the Lake Oswego Public Library, Andrew Edwards.
Good evening, everyone. Probably some of you are saying, hey, wait a minute, I know that guy. Isn't he supposed to be at Lakewood Center? Isn't there a show tonight? Well, that's my work job. This is my volunteer job. I am the volunteer president for the Friends of Lake Oswego Public Library. And if you don't know what the Friends are, they help the library. They have a specific mission to assist the library in fulfilling its mission through advocacy, funding, promotion, and volunteer support. The library, the Friends, helped sponsor 112 events at the library last year. Pretty impressive, isn't it? Our most favorite one, of course, is Lake Oswego Reads, but if you didn't know, some of the things that the Friends sponsor include the Third Tuesday Author Series, the Performing Arts Series, Adult Summer Reading Prizes, the First Tuesday Music Series, the Youth Summer Library Challenge Incentives, educational and cultural programs, special shows for youth, trivia night, and my favorite, books for babies. So you're probably wondering, okay, who are these Friends? How do I get involved? I can see you're anxious about that. You can certainly volunteer your time and efforts, but what really helps the Friends do what they do is having contributors. And maybe when you noticed, when you came through those doors, there were 2 banners. One described who all the individual Friends were, and the other one described all of the activities that the Friends do during the course of a year. Now, if you didn't see your name on the banner that says you are a friend, odds are you aren't. But you could be tonight. Now, it didn't cost anything to come in, but it might cost you a little to leave. There are envelopes outside if you care to join the Friends. It really will help. Did you know that the library had 800,000 items checked out this past year? 800,000 items. It's incredible what this library does. And what the Friends do is they help supplement what we enjoy about the library. So I hope you can join the Friends and be a part of the community and make it all happen. Thank you so much. I'd like to introduce the fabulous director of our library, Melissa Kelly. Melissa?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Andrew, for that very warm introduction, and to all of our Friends members for all that you do to support the library and programs like this one. I want to take a moment and remind everyone to please silence your cell phones if you haven't yet done so before we continue with our evening. And yes, my name is Melissa Kelly. It's my honor to serve as the library director for the city of Lake Oswego, and I'm really delighted to be here with you this evening. We're very pleased to share this very special 20th anniversary Lake Oswego Reads event with you, featuring author Emma Pattee. It's an honor to welcome Ms. Pattee to Lake Oswego to speak with us about her wonderful novel, Tilt. Following her remarks at the podium, Ms. Pattee will be joined by local author Henry Miller for an onstage conversation. We're also joined tonight by American Sign Language interpreters Sarah Smith and Sarika Mehta. At the conclusion of tonight's program, Ms. Pattee will be available to sign your books if you brought one along, and the 2 lucky winners of our Lake Oswego Reads Passport drawing will be announced. But first, it is my privilege to thank the amazing sponsors, staff, and volunteers who make Lake Oswego Reads possible. I also want to recognize and thank our city leaders here tonight. In addition to Mayor Joe Buck, we also have Councilor Verdick with us in the house, and maybe a few others snuck in. Thank you so much to them for their support. And again, we want to thank our Friends of the Library and our other title sponsors this year, the City of Lake Oswego, the Lake Oswego Rotary Club, Lakewood Center for the Arts, Lake Oswego Sustainability Network, and the Lake Oswego Review. Thank you so much for your support. We also have help from a tremendous group of local supporter sponsors who are detailed in our Lake Oswego Reads brochure and tonight's digital program. Lake Oswego Reads is also made possible with the help of our incredible Lake Oswego Reads Steering Committee and Events Committee volunteers. And of course, none of this could happen without the talents, enthusiasm, and dedication of our wonderful Nancy Nyland, the library's volunteer and special events coordinator. Thank you again to our sponsors, our community partners, and our hardworking staff and volunteers for their amazing work to bring Lake Oswego Reads to life each year. Please join me in giving them one more huge round of applause. And now what we've all been waiting for. It is my privilege to introduce our guest of honor, author Emma Pattee. Ms. Pattee is a climate journalist and fiction writer who has written about climate change for The Atlantic, The New York Times, The Washington Post, The Guardian, and more. In 2021, she coined the term climate shadow to describe an individual's potential impact on climate change. Emma's fiction has appeared in the Bellevue Literary Review, Idaho Review, New Orleans Review, Carve Magazine, Citron Review, and Alaska Quarterly Review. And Tilt is her first novel. Ms. Pattee is a Portland resident and is joined tonight by friends and family. How lucky are we to have the opportunity to hear her speak with our community. Without further ado, please welcome our special guest, author Emma Pattee, to the stage.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Well, first I just want to say thank you so much. It's an incredible honor, and I'm not from Lake Oswego. I'm from North Portland, but I actually spent a lot of time in Lake Oswego when I was a teenager because I worked for St. Honore, the bakery downtown. And somebody asked me if that was where I got the inspiration for the character in my book who makes all of her drinks full calf, no matter what you ask for. But no comment on that. And so I used to spend a lot of time down here, and I would spend my lunch breaks sitting on that little bench that looks out over the water and writing, because I was always trying to write a book. And then, would go back in and continue making coffees. And so today, driving down here, it was an incredibly full circle moment to pass by that little bench and just remember all the days I'd spent writing as I came here to get to talk to you guys about my book. So I'm just, it's an incredible honor, and I'm so grateful to Melissa and to Nancy and to the Lake Oswego Library. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about what I learned writing this book. And my story starts in 2019. And I'm very pregnant, and I am completely terrified. And I'm not terrified of having a baby. I'm not terrified of giving birth. I'm not terrified of the fact that I'm a freelancer, and so it's going to be an unpaid maternity leave. I am terrified of the earthquake. I'm terrified of the massive Cascadia earthquake, which is the one that we all learned about in 2015 in that New Yorker article. How many people here, there we go. How many people here learned about the earthquake from the 2015 article, right? And how many people who read that article were completely freaked out for like 1 week and then just forgot about it, right? Yeah, totally forgot about it. Put it from my mind until I got pregnant. And then all of a sudden I remembered, and I just started freaking out all over again. And so when I was pregnant, I had really terrible insomnia, and I would lie awake at night, and I would be playing in my head the scenario of what might happen if the earthquake hit that night, And in my mind, it was like my neighbors are banging on my door. It's this post-apocalyptic Mad Max scenario, and they're this kind of nameless, faceless mob, and they're trying to steal my water, and they want to take all my food, and I'm trapped inside, right, with my baby. And so I start researching, like, how do you barricade yourself in your basement, Like, where can I hide my beans that my neighbors won't know how to find my beans? And then one day I'm at IKEA, and I'm about 7 months pregnant, and I'm shopping for something for my unborn child, and I'm in the warehouse. I'm very tired, I'm very hungry, my feet are killing me, and I'm pulling a cardboard box from the big metal racks, and the building starts to shake. And I think, oh my God, it's the big one. I am going to die at IKEA. And then worse, if I don't die at IKEA, I have to walk home 7 months pregnant from IKEA. And in the 2 or 3 seconds that the building was shaking, I was asking myself, what would it take to get home? What am I going to have to do to survive? And what wouldn't I do to protect myself and to protect my child? And the good news is it actually wasn't the big earthquake. It wasn't even an earthquake. It was a big truck was backing up to the loading dock to unload furniture, and it causes the building to shake a little bit. So as soon as the building stopped shaking, I had in my mind this idea of a book about a very pregnant woman who is walking home from IKEA after a massive earthquake hits. And on the drive home, I called my writing coach and I said, I am going to write this book. And she said, Emma, you're 7 months pregnant. You think you want to focus on having a child? But the idea was planted in my mind. It had fully taken a hold of me. And so I started writing the book when my older kiddo was about 7 weeks old. And because I was already really terrified of the earthquake, right? And I had this mindset of this Mad Max, every man for themselves scenario, that really was the book I started to write. You know, it was like life or death, and people were pursuing her, and she couldn't trust anyone, and people were stealing like the little bits of food and water she could get for herself. So it was a real downer book, right? It was really terrifying. And then fast forward a couple years, now it's 2022. I'm still working on this book, and I'm pregnant again. And we decide we need a bigger house. So we move to Northeast Portland, to the Concordia neighborhood, and we move in next to this guy named Ethan. And Ethan is a really interesting character. Like right away, you can tell that Ethan is a prepper. And he has a structure in his backyard. And I say structure, not shed, because within the very first week, he let us know that there is no disaster on earth that could bring this structure down. This structure is completely reinforced. And he tells us that he knows how to fly small planes, that he is certified to operate a ham radio, he has a generator, he has every possible tool and gadget you can imagine. And I want to say that I found that reassuring, but actually I found it pretty weird. And then about 6 months later, as we've already discussed tonight, there was a very large ice storm. And the power at our house went out, and we were sort of there, we're in the cold, we're in the dark, and my older kiddo is at the window, and he goes, Mom, there's a construction worker in the street. I'm like, there's nobody in the street, right? It's complete ice. So I go to the window, and there is Ethan, and he's wearing a hard hat and a safety vest, and he is putting orange cones around where a power line has fallen and is sparking in the street. So we sat and watched Ethan that whole day, and here's what we saw. He used his generator to heat his house, and then he went next door and he brought over the elderly couple to make sure that they had heat. He then went door to door to everyone on the street and made sure that everybody was okay. And then he put his ice crampons on and he walked to Popeyes, and he got enough fried chicken for like the entire street. And he came to our house and he said, we have heat, we have hot water, we have tea, we have hot chocolate, we have fried chicken, and is there anything you guys need? And you are welcome to come and spend the day with us. You can stay as long as you need. And so that night, after the power had come back on, I lay in bed and I realized that there was another narrative for my book that I hadn't considered. Was it possible that after the earthquake, we would not all simply become zombies? I started to research how people actually handle disasters, and it does turn out that sometimes we don't become zombies. Something really interesting emerged. In times of disaster, we become more altruistic, we help each other, we work together. There's actually a phenomenon, it's called catastrophe compassion. And the historical record really doesn't seem to support this Mad Max scenario that I think so many of us have started to just accept as reality because we see it so often in media. And obviously, yes, disaster and war do cause people to do, really horrible things. That's undeniable, and we're seeing that right now. But also, and this is also undeniable, there are incredible moments of generosity and of connection and of caring and community. And in some ways, after disaster, we need each other more than we even need food and water. So it started to become important to me to write a different kind of narrative in my book. And my research also brought me to this book, some of you probably have heard of it, called Paradise Built in Hell by Rebecca Solnit. And Paradise Built in Hell is an examination of exactly kind of what I'm saying, of how the worst times can really bring out the best in people. And I want to read a quote from her book. Horrible in itself, disaster is sometimes a door back into paradise, the paradise at least in which we are who we hope to be, do the work we desire, and are each our sisters and brothers' keeper. The paradise at least in which we are who we hope to be. Now at the beginning of Tilt, my protagonist, Annie, is not who she hopes to be. She's stuck, she's angry, she's isolated, she's grieving, and she's so focused on what should have been that she really can't even see what still could be. So I started to wonder, could I give Annie a paradise in which she becomes who she hopes to be? Could a massive earthquake give Annie a chance to change her life? And I'm not saying that I succeeded at that, because that's for you guys to decide. But I want to tell you a little bit about how writing that new narrative changed me and changed my life. Because at the beginning of writing this book, I was not the person who I wanted to be, right? I was terrified of the earthquake, and I felt fundamentally against my neighbors. And I was suspicious of other people. I was focused only on my own well-being. But writing this book really changed me. Learning about the earthquake changed me. Researching how people act in disasters changed me. My neighbor Ethan changed me. Instead of just worrying about having enough food and water for myself, I started to worry, did I have enough for the most vulnerable people who live on my street? Instead of being scared about my neighbors breaking into my home, I realized I didn't know any of my neighbors' names. I started just trying to learn who they were. And instead of lying awake at night, worrying about the earthquake, I started to sleep soundly at night, believing that if the earthquake were to happen, I actually would have a chance to show up for my community in a way that was meaningful. Because what this book taught me, and what I believe, is that at the end of the world, when like our Pelotons are gone, we don't have our Volvos, and our credit cards don't work anymore, what we actually will have is each other. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emma, for giving us more insight into your book with your opening remarks. That was great. Next, as we set the stage for our author conversation, I am pleased to also introduce Henry Miller, who will be joining Ms. Pattee on stage to help us delve deeper into this wonderful book and the writing process. Henry Miller is a city planner at the Portland Bureau of Transportation and holds a master's in urban and regional planning from Portland State University. A born and raised Portlander, he has also worked for the City of Tigard, the City of Oregon City, and the largest transportation advocacy nonprofit in the region. In his first year as a journalist, Henry wrote about the intersection between city planning and urban culture. And after learning about the Cascadia subduction zone, his love for the region that raised him compelled him to apply his writing skills to put together the Pacific Northwest Disaster Guide. He continues to look for ways to turn his love of books and cities into tools to help his community through difficult times. Please welcome author Henry Miller as he joins Ms. Pattee on stage.
Good to see you. No?
We good?
Yeah, I think we're good.
All right.
Awesome. So good to see you.
Yeah.
Great presentation. It's great to hear your take on the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, which has also been a source of terror for me for like 6 or 7 years. And for folks who don't know, we've obviously met before, but we sat on a panel about a year ago at Powell's Books with some other folks who were disaster prep professionals based in Portland. And that was when I got a chance to read Tilt, and I really enjoyed it. And I had so many questions that I wanted to ask you while we were on that panel, but it was a panel, and it wasn't my job to ask any questions. And so I've been sitting on like 8 questions for like a year, and I'm very excited to be here. So first, let's get started. You're a journalist who writes about climate change. Why write fiction about the most natural of natural disasters?
Yeah, I wish, gosh, to be honest, I wish I had thought that through, because I didn't think about how confusing it would be to be a climate journalist writing about the one disaster that is not caused by climate change. And has led me to some, very sort of awkward on-air interview corrections. But, I think like I said before, the idea came to me like purely from a place of terror. And, I think what's so unique about how we live here in this region is that we live under the shadow of something coming that we like really can never prepare for, and we're all told to get prepared. But how do you prepare for something that is like a scale at which we really can't even imagine? And that certainly is climate change, and certainly is parenthood. And so, in a way, the book itself, it became a container on which so much of what I was thinking about and working on could be examined.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's that exact problem of the scale of this issue being so overwhelming. That's part of the reason why I wrote a book to help people prepare for the. Sorry, I didn't mean to plug myself so early.
Definitely. Henry wrote a fantastic book about how to prep for disasters in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, so Pacific Northwest Disaster Guide, and that exact question that that I was having with myself is, this problem is so enormous, it's so difficult to wrap your head around, that by tying it to these other things that we all think about all the time, and we know something needs to be done about it, might make it easier to actually act, to do something. So yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that. Tilt is set entirely in Portland. Were you ever tempted to broaden the scope, to write about other places that are going to be affected by this earthquake, add more characters?
Yeah, and definitely. Something that was infuriating about this book is that I started to research the earthquake. I really wanted this book to sort of be as accurate as I possibly could make it. And so I started to just to learn everything that I could about the earthquake. And then I got to a point where I knew so much about the earthquake, but I was writing a book told from the perspective of a woman who knows nothing about it, is completely unprepared, and is walking alone, and sort of can find out nothing about it. And so there was an earlier version of the book where she's walking and she just happens to meet a friendly local geologist who knows everything about the earthquake. And then, of course, I was immediately told to remove that. But I was just sort of desperate for any way to like stuff additional information into the book. But yeah, I think probably what was the biggest challenge for me was not including the coast and not being able to write a little bit more about that, because certainly that's one of the more serious concerns about the earthquake.
It's funny because you do mention the coast at least once, and it might actually be my favorite page, because you plug in so much information just casually in this conversation, I think with a barista that is trying to help Annie get to Dom.
Friendly barista geologist.
Barista geologist. And you mentioned that the tsunami hit the whole coast, and that it was 100 feet high, and they only had 10 minutes or so to evacuate to higher ground. And it is so comfortably woven into the narrative, and the anxiety that both of the characters are feeling while this information is going on between them feels so real. And it's so interesting because I wrote a guidebook, and I thought that was the best way to get the information to sink in. But there's something about having characters experience this traumatic moment, and it makes the information sink in just a little bit more. So I really liked that page. Okay, so next question. Not to brag, but I was reading War and Peace while I was reading your book, Leo Tolstoy's classic, and I was really struck when I was reading both of these books at how similar a lot of the scenes were between the earthquake's aftermath in Portland and the French invasion of Moscow, and the way that Tolstoy describes the chaos, and how people are going through trauma in real time, and people are fleeing, and there might be looting, and all these things going on. And it was just so interesting to me how I'm assuming that might not have been your source of inspiration for those days. Maybe it was, or maybe you were just channeling Tolstoy, but I'm just curious, what else, you already mentioned what has informed some of your perspective, the research you've done to understand how people will act in the case of a disaster. But can you talk maybe a little bit more about what else informed your opinion or your perspective on this?
Yeah, no, I was not reading War and Peace. While you were reading War and Peace, I was reading Hungry, Hungry Hippo just over and over. So actually, my book's modeled on the narrative shape of Hungry, Hungry Hippo. Yeah, no, it's hard. Tolstoy does not blend itself so well with a life with young children. But when I was writing this book, I was working on a separate project, a climate-related project, and one of the main interviewees was a woman who had grown up in the fall of the Soviet Union, and it was really fascinating what she what she had lived through and what she described, and so much of that and made it into my book, which really was like so much darkness and then also so much light.
Awesome. So while I was reading this book, I was also really struck by how much I related to the husband, Dom, who is not a great husband, but is a writer from Portland and a millennial man. So my question is, first, why did Annie risk her life to save him? Who is he based on? And is there anything that will redeem millennial male artists as good husbands? Bear in mind, you're talking to one.
Oh my goodness. No, they're not paying me enough for that question. I'm sorry, Henry. That's really interesting. I did not understand how much people would hate the Dom character. It's been really interesting to sort of like travel the country and just really see this really intense reaction to him, which is so funny because actually I modeled that character after myself, and so I also find him quite endearing. And I do think there is really something that we all find very endearing about the artists that kind of can't give up their art. And that is just such a romantic story. You and I are also in our lives kind of living that, and it can also be a really impoverished story, right? Like it can be a really disappointing story, and it can be very, very challenging for the people who love people like us. And so I really wanted to write into sort of that perspective. I grew up here. I was a theater kid. I really wanted to be a writer, and every kid I knew wanted to be a writer, wanted to be an actor, wanted to be a playwright, and then essentially none of us could afford rent anymore. We were all working at coffee shops, and we were all like trying to catch our big break, and the prices just sort of kept going up and up. And you wake up in your 30s, and everyone has dental bills. Is really facing this like incredibly unsexy reality of how badly you want the thing, and yet still you want the thing. And so I wanted to. I just saw that so many books about characters who want to be artists were coming, out of Brooklyn, had characters who lived in Brooklyn, really weren't talking in the same way about class and about money, and inevitably had the books end with the characters becoming rich and famous because their art took off. And I just wanted to write a different reality, which I still think is a happy ending. At the end of this book, I still believe that Annie and Dom want their art as badly as before, and will still chase it. But I wanted to kind of show what it means to be an artist when you don't have that type of success or notoriety.
Yeah, and it's really interesting how reading about these characters struggle with things like being able to pay for air conditioning in their unit. Like that is a topic that comes up, not to mention the dentist bills. And it kind of, when you're thinking about getting ready for the earthquake or other disasters, it's kind of easy to overlook how unprepared so many of us are for just daily life because of things being so expensive and just general challenges. And it was, I feel like it makes it hit that much harder when you realize like how unprepared she is in the moments when this happens. So what has the response been like? I'm curious who do you think your audience is, and what questions have they had for you?
Yeah. It's a really funny scenario when you write a book about your worst nightmare, and then the book actually ends up doing fairly well because your worst nightmare just becomes everyone else's worst nightmare. You just like hand off your like, and so it's been really, it's been. I'm so sorry. Sorry to the city of Lake Oswego. But I think on a more serious note, as I started to write the book, which I obviously started, not thinking it would ever get published, just as this sort of obsessed project. But as I started to get more serious about it, it took on a really big ethical weight for me. And part of that is that I learned more about the situation with brick schools in Portland. And also part of that is that I learned that my best friend's kiddo was going to go to school, was going to start kindergarten in one of those schools. And actually the school, initially, there's a scene in the book that's set at a school, and initially that school was the school where her child was going to go to kindergarten. And it really brought home for me the seriousness of the thing that I was writing about. And it became, this kind of compass for me that was like, when the book was finished, when I slide it across the table to my best friend, can I look her in the face and say, I did not make this, worse than I think it's going to be just to sell more books. And I didn't make it better than I think it's going to be, safer than I think it's going to be, just to make this an easier read. Like, this is actually, based on all of my research, based on sort of everything I can find out, this really is what I think is going to happen. And that really became my compass. Excuse me. And then it actually evolved into something much bigger, because I started doing investigative work into those schools. And I started pushing PPS in partnership with Willamette Week to release some of their more recent seismic assessments into the state of those schools. And that ended up taking years to get them to release that. And they ended up releasing it like a couple weeks before my book came out. And Willamette Week, one of their editors, decided that what they wanted to do was to run my investigative work alongside the chapter of my book that is set at the school. And that was very hard for me, because I felt like that would really scare people. And the editor at Willamette Week, who I have a wonderful relationship with, who's very, very intelligent, said, no, this is, we have a civic obligation to run this, and we want to run it. We really believe that this can make a change. And in a very sort of bizarre twist of fate, and one that was, sort of entirely out of my hands, all of that ended up happening as PPS was pushing everyone to vote for this very large bond, the largest bond that we've ever voted on. And because there was so much uproar about this piece that Willamette Week had published, PPS sort of was forced to file an emergency amendment and to commit to repairing 10 of their most dangerous schools in order for the bond to pass. And then the bond did pass. And so,
Thank you for doing that. Thank you. So that kind of leads to my next question. After reading your book, what do you hope your audience does next?
It's a great question. Read this incredible book, The Pacific Northwest Disaster Guide. But seriously, I think I will kick this over to Henry, because I do have my own answer, but I'm actually curious what you would say, because I get asked this all the time. Like, what is the first thing someone should do to prepare for the earthquake?
I mean, the first thing that I always tell people is start with a go bag. Not necessarily because it's the most essential thing. There are lots of things that you can do, but because it's the easiest thing to wrap your head around, to get into the mindset of how to prepare and where to get started. Next, I usually tell people to start stockpiling food and to have a plan. And then I recommend that they start thinking about water. Water is the hardest thing to prepare for. To have an actual gallon of water for every person in your household for 2 weeks at least would be ideal. But it's if you live in apartments, or if you're in a small apartment, or a small house, it's really difficult. And there are lots of different solutions out there. In my book, I recommend having water filters as a helpful backup. But I've also encountered other solutions from folks since I came out with my book. One of my favorites is to stockpile canned soda water in your fridge. A lot of us are already drinking that, so that's something that you can turn to a little bit more easily than having, a giant jug in your basement somewhere. But yeah, I mean, I think that the first thing to do is to do something. I mean, whatever feels like something that you can do, that you can wrap your head around and get started. Sometimes that's joining in a neighborhood emergency team for some people. Sometimes it's going to volunteer for the Red Cross, or there's lots of different things you can get started on, but just get to the point where you feel empowered that you can take the next step, I think would be the recommendation I have.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of like, the first thing you should do is like something.
Yeah.
Because I think so many people are stuck in paralysis. I have certainly been there. It's a natural place that you find yourself.
Yeah, and there's not a perfect list. I mean, I have a perfect list in my book, but there isn't a perfect list because every household is different. It has different people living in it. They have different needs. They live in different communities. The subject of my next book that I'm working on now is the differences between neighborhoods and towns, and how disaster risk is much higher in some places than it is in others. And so, yeah, it is something where it's like, as long as you're moving, as long as you're thinking about it in a way that's productive and that gets you to the next step, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, I have one more question, actually, if we have time, which I'm gonna say we do, because I'm really curious. What happens after Bean is born?
My goodness. I did an event last week, and someone was like, "Oh, can you write a sequel? But then the sequel should be like the volcano." Yeah, I get a lot of late night Instagram messages from people that are like, I cannot sleep until you tell me what happens after the book ends. And sometimes I do. I actually, a book club reached out to me and said, we have one member, and she is so upset about your ending, and it's her birthday, and for her birthday, we would like you to send her an explanation of why your book ended where it ended. And I love that. Like, I love, what's sweeter than a book club that like loves each other? And so I went back, and I found a draft because of course I have a draft that has a very like happy, cheesy ending, where she gets home and her husband's waiting with flowers and whatever. Her husband is neighbor Ethan, like they have a generator. And I printed that out, and I put it in a birthday card, and I mailed it to her. I was like, there you go, Sarah of Kansas, happy birthday. But I, because of my work as a journalist, I have reported a lot on natural disasters, and something about natural disasters that feels, and kind of disaster in general, that seems to just be a feature, is a long walk and waiting to find out what's happened to people that you love. And I reported a lot on the fires in Southern Oregon, and it was just story after story after story of this long walk, and then this long wait. You hear that after tsunamis. You hear that you truly, like every disaster, you flooding, and so I knew that for me, like I really wanted to honor that piece of it. Like that's what I was the most interested in. And I was really interested in stories of how on that walk, you hear this a lot coming out of 9/11, sort of on that walk, that's when you decide you're gonna quit your job. You're gonna move to Paris, like you're gonna get divorced. And I met a woman who told me that she worked in one of the towers with this guy, and she liked him, but whatever, they kind of were just still getting to know each other. And on 9/11, he evacuated their whole office. He knew exactly what to do. Like he just stepped up and showed so much sort of like leadership and bravery. And then the two of them walked home across the Brooklyn Bridge. And halfway across the bridge, she looked at him and was like, "Oh, I'm gonna marry this guy." And they are still married. And I love that story, right? Because like in these moments of disaster, we get a chance to really see what matters, and that's what was interesting to me. And so for that reason, the book really does end right there. But if anyone here would like to write the version of what happens the 2 months after the earthquake, I will be the first person to buy your book. Yeah.
Nice, and you'll give them a writing credit, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for writing this book.
Henry.
It's amazing.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
What a fantastic evening. Thank you so much. Please join me in giving Emma and Henry a huge round of applause. Thank you both so much for sharing your stories with us, for giving us the benefit of listening to that conversation. That was really amazing. It's an honor to have you visit our community. We're just so pleased to have you with us tonight. Thank you again to our wonderful audience for joining us for this very special event. We couldn't be more grateful for your time and having you here with us. Thank you. And at this time, I have the pleasure of announcing our Lake Oswego Reads Passport Drawing Prize winners. Robina Ingram Rich, I believe. And Dave Bauer. Thank you. Congratulations. Winners can pick up their prize baskets here tonight if in attendance or at the library, starting tomorrow at 10 a.m. In just a few minutes, Emma Pattee will be available to sign books, and so if you brought along your copy of Tilt to be signed, please prepare to line up along the right side of the auditorium and open your book to the page you would like signed. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us for this very special Lake Oswego Reads author presentation, for our 20th year of Lake Oswego Reads, and for your ongoing support of the Lake Oswego Public Library. Have a wonderful and safe evening.